of, of revolutions that happened in 2005 and 2013. And the reason for this revolution was that people who came in the street, they demanded better life. They demanded less corruption, or let me say no corruption. And the one of 2005, unfortunately, didn't bring much of the result, and that's actually what brought me to Ukraine in 2005, and I was extremely frustrated that I had to leave a year later when the new regime came, who turned out to be even more corrupt than the one before revolution. So that was extremely depressing. The 2013 revolution was totally different because there was too much at stake. We lost lives in the center of our beautiful capital. But also, the war started with Russia, both military and economic war. And that changed the reality. That objectively required a very radical change of policies in order to survive. And that also brought some strong support from the West, bilateral, but also from international financial institutions. What it also brought, the new things, is new people to the government, to the administration, to the parliament, that move things, reforms forward. And very importantly is the civil society, who become much stronger, matured, and real player. And with these factors, despite extremely difficult external environment, I describe it that, everything that could have gone wrong with the country actually went wrong. You have the largest country near you who, annex the territories, start the war, starts economic war. There was turmoil in external markets. So despite that very tough environment, external environment, we were quite successful. We transformed the country for these 3 years. And we returned to the growth. Of course, I can give you some numbers, but let's just keep the message. We return to growth. We make our economy resilient. We reoriented economy from number one economic and trade partner, Russia, to Western, to Europe, benefiting from EU-Ukraine Association Agreement, but also to the new markets. And that all happened within 3 years. We actually now, I think there's 628 states, since we don't buy even a single cubic of gas from Russia, a cubical meter. And we used to receive all the gas imported from Russia, fully dependent. Now, we don't buy any. And that obviously also requires some very serious changes in policies. But I can say that we're still fragile. We understand that there is a huge progress, but we're still fragile. Why? Because people still haven't, they don't feel the result of the reforms yet, which is understandable. It takes time. It takes time. And some of the reforms that we started, they're not implemented. And obviously, for many of the reforms, until you complete it, you don't expect any results. So we're in that critical moment now. Then there is a very valid question. Could we achieved more? Clearly we could, clearly. And, but let's face it, none of the countries in the world managed to achieve as much as we did over the last 3 years. This is also a fact. I see two reasons why we didn't achieve as much as we actually wanted. First is we lost the first year after revolution. We had to do more. objectively. It's not no one to blame because I was also part of it. I was the representative of the president in the cabinet. It was very difficult. There were so many challenges, but that was the best year to implement reforms. People were ready for everything in order to see Ukraine to break through. We lost this year mainly. Then second, we didn't get rid of the vested interest. The system is still polluted with such vested interest, and it's one of the biggest obstacles that resist to the reforms in the country. But it also shapes out the formula for success. In order to win, we need to also build alliances between new people within the government, administration, with civil society, with international institutions. And with these alliances, we're winning. With this battle, this 3-year battle, we're winning by building such alliances. For example, I'll give you one example, is setting up of National Anti-Corruption Bureau in 2014. That was maybe one of the projects I was the most proud of. Although I wasn't a minister at that time, but I was in the presidential administration, we've been working on this law with civil society, with our partners from other institutions, and we worked out, I believe, the optimal formula for the new institution in Ukraine that could deliver results. Professional, independent, powerful. And that was done through these alliances. I remember that day when this law was passed in the parliament. For many people it would look a bit odd, but when I was in the parliament, I was confident that that law would be adopted because I've seen the civil society activists waiting for any negative reactions. It was a pressure. And it was a very strong signal from the president as well that law needs to be passed. And it was adopted, and now we have a very strong institution. There are still some weak spots. If I mention this vested interest in the parliament. I'm not talking about the whole parliament because we have quite strong people there, including the Speaker of the Parliament, including a lot of other MPs. But obviously we have some other people who don't care about the public good, but rather their own. Another obstacle is law enforcement. This is the system of law enforcement institutions. It's our very bad legacy. We're building new economy, we're building new relationships, but the law enforcement institutions stayed in 20th century, like nothing happened. And they also kind of vested interest, right? And they, by the way, finding common positions, common interest very quickly to stop the advancements. Not only reforms overall, which is the case, but also in reforms of these institutions themselves. They're blocking it. And every day, unfortunately, there are some bad news. Even recently, what's happened with SBU raid. But that system, this is a system which needs to be changed. Before change of law enforcement institutions, reforming it deeply, we're restricting ourselves. By the way, Ukraine is quite good in restricting itself. We have the same with agricultural sector. For many years we have moratorium on agricultural land, which restricts our own potential. So we need to recognize it and address it. There is a solution for the law enforcement, and I'm pushing the initiative for creating a financial police that would take powers from these ineffective institutions, would allow them to concentrate on what they created for, counterintelligence, the non-commercial crimes, non-economic crimes, but create one effective, compact institution that would effectively fight economic crimes against the state. A kind of national anti-corruption bureau. So I'm using the same model. What we have learned in 2014, we're applying now for the financial police. Clearly, we will need some alliances to push it through. The same as it was done with NABU. We need strong alliances because resistance is enormous. But that should happen. Without this, we just restrict ourselves. Well, obviously, for land reform, the same. For me, it's not a question. The land reform should be adopted, and I will put all my efforts now. Well, of course, there is a budget, there is financial police, rest, but there is also land reform, and I will use as much kind of political capital that I have to push this forward, because this is absolutely necessary now for the country. Maybe I will conclude already. I will be happy to answer your questions. But what I want to say is that Ukraine is moving ahead. It's a success story. I described a very difficult battle, which is a reality, but we're winning this battle. And I'm not a salesman. It's one of the topics I didn't like in my business school is marketing. I'm never good in marketing. I don't like to sell, especially something I don't believe in. I'm in the process. We're doing these reforms and we're winning. I'm not persuading you. This is a reality, right? So I have right to say this. And now is the critical time. We passed a lot of the reforms on the parliament level. But this is not where we need to stop. We cannot stay still now and be comfortable, because it's not a point of no return. Next challenge is implementation. Implementation is a key everywhere, right? And it's key in the government policies as well. So we just adopted the pension reform. Very important. Now we need to implement it. Next week, I hope we'll adopt the healthcare reform. We will need to implement it. We're pushing ahead the reform of higher education. Here, Ministry of Finance, right, especially active, because I do believe in education. And I don't believe in all practices, give us more money, we'll give you a result. I know that you will get the money and it will be even less effective. So it's about changing the system. It's about changing the motivation of students so that it will be similar to motivation here. You're motivated to study, we will support you. You're not motivated, why should we waste taxpayers' money? So now implementation is a key. And during this implementation, we need the support. Ukraine, and not only in Ukraine, I hear some criticism. It's valid sometimes, but sometimes it's exaggerated. It is clearly exaggerated. In Ukraine, we have this assessment. It's called перемога or zrada, which is victory or treason. The world is not black and white. Everything is in the middle, right? There were somewhere clearly перемога victories. There were some drawbacks, almost treason. But overall, we're actually progressing quite well. And at this moment, I think that we need a continued support of our efforts. I, as a Minister of Finance, when we talk about financial resources, we treat our taxpayers' money the same way as we treat taxpayers' money of the countries that support us, right? And we do it, this is our principle. So everything should be used effectively. And the money should be more directed on the areas where we need it. Healthcare reform, crucial. Capacity to implement it is not there. We have a very strong leadership in the Ministry of Healthcare. We're supporting from our side. There is a strong support from Prime Minister. But to implement such a serious reform, we need to have a capacity, and we will need your support. Similar things in other spheres. For example, for the financial police, I need the support. The same as it was done for NABU. Without expertise, without the training that we received from our American partners, and not only, NABU wouldn't exist. And there are some, especially when we build new institutions, we need this kind of support. It's indispensable. I most likely will conclude with this. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic in life, despite all difficulties, but I'm also optimistic in the work. So the more challenges we face on the way, it just motivates us harder. It makes us, maybe gray hair, but it motivates to move ahead. And actually, I'm quite proud for what we achieved, and I'm very confident that the goals that we set in front of ourselves, we will be able to achieve as well as we've done it in the previous 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You offered us quite a good overview, and I will first follow up with a number of questions, and then later on I will open up for questions from the floor. Of course, you are here in Washington for the annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank. The big question on the agenda, of course, is will you get the next tranche from the IMF, or when do you expect to see an IMF mission, and which are the queries with regard to the IMF agreement that you find particularly politically difficult to get through now?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, obviously I'm here for discussions with IMF, but also it's for discussions with my colleagues, ministers, and from other countries as well. It's a very big event, the annual meeting, so we're discussing many issues. With regards to the IMF program, there are no surprises there. There were some prior actions for the next review, and we're implementing these actions. Number one, and the most important, was the pension reform. And it was adopted last week and signed by the president just a couple of days ago. It's enacted now. And it's not a prior action for the, well, it is the Euro prior action for this review, but it's the most important reform overall in the IMF program. And clearly, a year ago, nobody knew what would this reform look like. But there were a lot of voices saying it's A, unnecessary, harmful, and by the way, it's impossible to do. But we managed to do it now. So this is one. The next things on the to-do list is the law that simplifies the privatization process. Mm-hmm. It's already in the parliament. It went through the committee, and we expect its adoption in first reading. I don't give any promises because I lost the links to with Kiev on this topic, but I believe it's also next week. Then anti-corruption court. We've been waiting for feedback from the Venice Commission. It was received last week, I believe, also, or yeah, I think last week. And now the law needs to, that regulates creation of the anti-corruption courts, need to be amended with the reflecting the inputs from the Venice Commission, and resubmitted to the Parliament. So pretty much those are the three things that one of them is already achieved, the other two which is on the way, but which we're addressing. So I very realistic about receiving the tranche this year. It's symbolic, it's important. There are some discussions how critical the program is. Somebody says it's extremely critical, somebody says Ukraine is walking away. It's not true. Both of the statements is not true. IMF program is very important to us, but it's not a question whether we need tranche this month, next month, in 2 months, right? We're not in such a position to that the 1 month matters. But it's much more important is to receive a tranche as a signal that we are progressing. And we're building reputation as a country who delivers. And so progress with IMF program is a strong signal that we're doing the right thing. This is much more important now. So that's what motivates us. There was also, I'll just address it because I was asked a couple of times the questions, and it's one of the most typical questions. I don't know whether in your list or not, but I would ask, what do you think, Minister of Finance? Because somebody say that after you tap the market and you raise $3 billion, you are not motivated to work with IMF.
That was my next question.
Really?
Yes. Go ahead. And?
I asked the question, can you answer?
The question is to you.
It has nothing to do with it, right? Just there are a couple of reasons. First, the money that we receive from IMF, they go to the national bank reserves. They don't go into the budget. And when we raise, debt on the capital market, or we place bonds, we finance the budget. So totally different things. A. B, as I said, IMF is a strong signal for us to attract investments, both equity and debt. And the markets will be looking at us. Are we performing? Are we delivering? And we're delivering by implementing reform. If we're implementing reforms which are supported by IMF, what the point of not working with IMF then, right? So I think it's a wrong kind of message coming from the past when actually the programs were not implemented. They were just started and then dropped quite quickly. We progress very significantly with the IMF program. We're now time-wise in the midpoint of the program. But in terms of the structural reforms, we have only 1 or 2 outstanding. The rest is already completed on a low level, right? Now we need to implement them. So actually, we have only benefit from being with IMF. And another argument, which it's only came to my mind today, is pension reform. If we really believe that when we tap the market, we don't want to work with IMF and stop on the reform track, so why did we adopt this reform last week? Why did we do that? We did it because we believe in the reforms. We believe that they transform the country. So we are committed and we're moving ahead.
Then a natural follow-up question is, if you are doing so well on the international markets, raising this $3 billion last month, why not go ahead and do more? Are you planning to do more? Can you say anything about that in the near future?
Like you have a very big supermarket, it doesn't mean that you need to buy everything there, right? We now have access to the market, and obviously we will use it smartly. When will be the optimal time? We can do some of liability management. Could happen whatever the time is right for us. If we need some additional money, we would raise it. But at the moment, I don't see any need. I see no need. The budget is doing fine. We're keeping deficit with it. We're actually reducing the deficit every year. Next year, it will be 2.4%. And we'll continue shrinking the deficit to 2% by 2020. So it's not like we're hungry looking around for the money. I can tell you even more. I was approached about re-entering the market at the beginning of the year by many investment banks. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. Because I believed that at that time, our reforms weren't priced in. Market conditions wasn't optimal. And by the way, we haven't given enough thought of what we want to achieve from this. And guess, now when we tap the market in September, we had a very smart proposal that also reduced the risks for the investors, right? Cash and liability management. So sometimes there should be no rush. All decisions needs to be justified. So next time when decision tap the market will be justified, we'll make it.
But then I could suggest a reason for you to go to the market rather soon. You have these GDP vouchers that were a result of the debt restructuring,
right,
where $3.6 billion were written off. And since you're doing so well, the value of these GDP vouchers are now quickly rising, and they're already worth $2 billion. Wouldn't it be better to buy them out as soon as possible before they become even more expensive?
For the interest of the warrants, we're doing very badly. We are terribly doing.
Indeed. So what are you going to do about it?
Well, look.
You can't answer that question.
Don't inflate the value of our warrants. We keep our options open. That's it. We keep our options open. But again, including for the warrants, obviously, when there is the right time, because I'm sure after you said this, that warrants now jump in value. So next minute we're not going to buy it. We'll wait until the price will adjust.
Okay.
Can you make more negative comments? It helps.
Okay, then I'll give you a negative. You have a certain bank, Privatbank.
Right.
And the owners have a liability of at least $5.5 billion.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's really $10 billion given the exchange rate at the time when they took it out. What are you going to do about that? I should say Privatbank, as you know, in December was nationalized.
Was nationalized, yes.
And it's now the responsibility of the Minister of Finance to sort out this. And the two big former owners disappeared with loans that were given to 50 or 100 unknown shell companies in Cyprus and cannot be easily collected. So how are you going to collect that?
Yes. But just to give you some more information on Privat, and obviously you know it very well, Privat is the largest bank in the country, and it was a time bomb, right? It was time bomb for many years because the money were taken from it many years ago. And given its scale and its importance for the financial system, and some political also elements, because it's not just two businessmen. They're oligarchs, right? They have some influence on media, on parliament. So we had to defuse this bomb. And we've done it. We nationalized this bank in December. I still remember this night because that was a budget night. Minister of Finance is the most important day. But Minister of Finance of Ukraine, it's the most important night, usually. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, I had to sign 2 documents, including the acquisition of Privatbank. I remember that night. Anyway, so since then, we have obviously, because the problem has a huge scale, we need to address many issues. First is to develop the bank. And this, by the way, we as a shareholder, as Minister of Finance, this is our direct responsibility, direct. Because after we put almost $6 billion into the bank to capitalize it, to cover the gap, right, in the capital, we cannot afford this bank to, not to perform well, go bust, right? We need to develop it. So we put in place professional supervisory board. One of the members of the supervisory board is just sleeping in the first row. And this is example of the corporate governance that we want to see across all state sector. Now we're working on the strategy for private bank, how to really kind of find a right model for it, because before that it didn't have normal lending capacity. It was all done to that many companies, but surprisingly with a very small team. So maybe it's actually all very related. So in order to progress, we need to build this capacity, and so they were working on this. In terms of the liability of former shareholders, it will be a long battle. It will not be easy battle. And we're going to do it, and we'll do it together with National Bank, because they, as a regulator, have been trying to resolve the problem with private bank for quite a long time. And good that we find the common position in December to nationalize it. So obviously we coordinate our efforts to recover such losses. But we are those who moving processes forward. But you might understand that it needs to be done by the law enforcement. It's a violation of the law, of Ukrainian law, and they need to be active. They need to do things, right? We need to help them, but they need to progress. So that will be, and here, by the way, we have the issue of capacity. We need a very strong. That's where we actually needed financial police, people who can fight, investigate such frauds, right, or such situations, right? Because there needs to be. We need to have a capacity to do it. But anyway, so we are determined to recover the losses, and that's what people expect from us, and that's what we're going to do and doing at the moment.
But then, no fault of yours, 56% of banking assets are now owned by state banks, and how do you look upon this for the future? The government policies to privatize a substantial part of this. How do you realistically see that this will be done? Will it be sales to hedge funds, or who could possibly buy this? European banks are no longer interested in buying banks in Eastern Europe. US banks are not interested. Where would you find a demand for it? Or would you do initial public offerings of the banks? How can you privatize banks in Ukraine today?
Well, you know me, I'm libertarian. My typical answer is privatize. I don't want to deal with it. That's why good that you mentioned it's not my fault, because I would never agree, to increase the stake of the state in something that should be run on commercial basis by private sector. But we are where we are. Yes, I do see privatizing these banks in the future. Not now, because simply if you now, we will look like idiots going to sell something which, buy this. What do you have in this box? You don't know, but you buy it, right? So the banks needs to be prepared for privatization, right? The appetite will come, right? And then we will exit. And we're doing it step by step. For example, for two of the banks, we negotiate with IFC and open or not? We negotiate for international financial institutions to step in. It's an IMF memorandum, so it's not closed. So to step in and to help with with corporate governance, with building the business processes, which will increase the value of the bank prior to privatization. When demand will be there, we will sell. Meanwhile, we need to address the issues of NPLs. We need to address the problems of corporate governance. And we also need to put in place sound business model for each of the bank. And renew the lending. That's why these banks are created for.
You mentioned in your presentation the need to legalize private sales of agricultural land.
Yeah.
And you have had this moratorium since the land was privatized to the former members of the kolkhoz in 2000. And then the moratorium has been renewed, usually 1 year at a time, sometimes 2 years. And now it is valid until the end of this year.
Yes.
But there is a massive popular majority against allowing private sales. How are you going to manage this? It's two things. One is to have a good model that is accepted, and the other is how can you convince people that this is a good thing that should be done?
There is a group of people who are opposing it, but we also underestimate the groups that should support it. And we need to work with such groups. One of these groups is farmers, for example. Farmers need to benefit from land market reform. And our answer should actually help them to achieve this. They will be able to use land as a collateral. They will be able to, obviously, by this attracting financing. They will treat land now as their own, and this is a very different thing. It's like you or somebody lease a car, rent a car, and if it's yours, you treat it in one way. If it's rented and you're in a bad mood, you may treat it slightly differently, right? So this is the same with the land. This is absolutely the same with the land. So anyway, I do believe in land market reform. We're extremely busy now with other things. It's not like we, waiting whether the land reform, is right. Should we pick it now? We are very busy with other things. But I do believe that we need to consolidate our efforts now and push this reform. And this is doable. After pension reform is over, we need to concentrate on land market reform because it brings enormous benefits.
You don't want to specify the parameters, how much land should be allowed to be sold?
It's not, I'm supporting, total opening of the market, but I understand that model will not go through. Mm-hmm. I'm already got used to finding compromises, and I think we have a model, right, that would allow to launch the land market in a way that, it will bring results. Clearly, in order for it to bring results, the illegal entities also need to have access. Maybe with restricted, sizes of lot sizes, but they should, because otherwise there will be no impact. If you want to get some economic benefits, it needs to be fluid. It's like capital, right? It needs to go to those who can use it most productively and benefit from this. That's reform. Everything else is imitation. Mm.
And in your presentation, you complained about vested interest. Normally, people who discuss Ukraine complain about oligarchs. You complained about oligarchs in one case when it came to Privatbank. We can't mention the names here because then we would be sued by the people in question for libel. Can you just elaborate on what is the difference? Is it right to complain about oligarchs, or is vested interest in the parliament a better formulation of a resistance? I have this discussion with certain people here in the audience.
Look, first of all, don't complain about anything. How can you complain about the. It's part of reality, and by the way, this reality is changing. After nationalization of private bank, we changed the reality. This is extremely important, right? Because yeah, it means that if oligarchs they used to, pretty much achieve whatever they want to achieve, it's not the case anymore, right? But this is what we're doing by our actions, but also the way we develop the country. It is open for all capital around the world, right? And oligarchs mainly already acquiring some assets. These assets needs a lot of investments to stay, actually, to stay in business, and they will be busy with doing this. So the role of oligarchs is going back. It's staying in the history, gradually. It's happening, and even if we don't make some steps, it will happen. But we actually kind of supporting this process. And the next, the privatization efforts that we will do over the next 2 years, we simplify, we change the process, so it will be open to everyone. There will be no restriction. There will be no way, deliberately or not deliberately, manipulate anything, right? Clear, transparent, by one parameter, which is price. No hidden twist, as it was done in the past.
Thank you. I will open up the floor to questions now. So please, if we can get mics here in the front. And please introduce you by name and institution.
Minister, welcome to Washington. My name is Roberto Penido. I'm the CEO of Together for America. With no doubt, corruption is one of the biggest problems for Ukraine economy. That is why you want to create the financial police. My question is, if you're looking for support, why you don't look in the support of the United Nations? The United Nations has been creating a very, very good commission against corruption in Guatemala, which has been working very, very good. So I think that can be a very good source for you.
Thank you. Thank you for the idea. We open and explored the situation with again with corruption. It's everywhere topic number one, right? But we also we need to address it clearly. But we also shouldn't allow that to cover a very positive changes in the country. This is extremely unfair. Extremely unfair. When you talk with some businesses now, some, I cannot say a lot, but everyone, but some businesses, they don't tell you anything about corruption. Situation is changing. There are two processes in the country. First is making sure that the anti-corruption infrastructure works, right? This is when it's already happened. You want to kind of investigate and prosecute. Another kind of vector, right, or direction is, which is, by the way, proved to be much more effective, is remove opportunities for corruption. And we're doing it by creating markets, right? When there is a state intervention, you want it, you don't want it, you create opportunity for, for misusing the powers. I'll give you an example that what we've done with the ministry, within the ministry, there was a historical problem in the tax sphere related to VAT refunds. Usually was the biggest, area for corruption within the tax administration. By changing the mechanism is administrated, we closed it, right? So there is, somebody lost billions, and I don't care, because now this money went to who they belong to the business. And so closing, we need to do parallel things. But very important is, institutions extremely important, but also important is building the policies in such a way that you just reduce areas for corruption.
Thank you.
My name is Walter Jurasek. I'm Polish-American Congress member. So thank you for the question, taking my question. Let me ask you something. I have actually two questions and comments. What will be the base for land reform? That's one thing. Isn't this better for leasing? They have in US, they leasing quite a bit federal lands across, and it works quite well. Privatization is a besetting thing. Privatization. If you want to privatize, as you just mentioned, even the banks, all that stuff, and you never can ask question is, who has the money, Ukraine, and where the money come from? Why didn't in the past, how they get the money? Where they get that money from? Because that's where the oligarchs, the rich Ukrainians,
Okay.
get the money from somewhere, haven, roads. They were selling out industries.
I will repeat.
Selling out the industry like they did in Poland. They selling out and they lost jobs, everything, and it was messy. The West bought the industry, in no time they closed the industry, so they lost the jobs. This is the base and model for Ukraine, that's not as very good news for them either. And quite many Ukrainians work in Poland as well. So question, how you really can fight with the huge corruption which you have, in sense of it, with the oligarchs, which have so much money. They're going to be fighting with you like hell.
Understood.
I think that the question is clear.
Okay, so first question about the land, and second about the privatization and how to make sure that the dirty money is not being used, right? Is that the one? Okay, first, let's get it right. Thank you for citing the example of the United States. For me, land reform is sensitive, right? So I may be maybe like too aggressive, but it's not the state that owns land in the country, Ukraine. The land was privatized. All of you in Ukraine would own the land. But under Ukrainian law, you're not allowed to sell it. This is your property and you cannot sell it. Can you imagine this in the United States? This is your property. Your property. So yes, if you want to lease it, it's your choice. If you want to sell it, it's your choice. But it's not for the government to tell you that you cannot sell your property. I don't know what kind of reality it is, but I don't like this reality in Ukraine. It is the fundamental violation of the rights in the country that happened 15 years ago. And I don't want it to stay. Because guess what? If we adopt this and we live with this, that maybe next time I would say in the, who knows, you cannot sell your house. And by the way, I don't like that you're going to sell your car. Lease it. Lease it. It's good for you. We're going to protect you. That's what was used for the land. And that's how we're going to change this. We need to communicate reality. Reality is totally different. This land belongs to people. And we as a state have no right to restrict it. No right. And by the way, by restricting it now, we're doing it even worse for the people. We're acting in the interest of somebody else, but not in the interest of these people. Because in the interest of these people, if they want to sell the land, they should do it. Right? In the interest of these people, that the land would circulate and somebody who can use it effectively would use it. Pay taxes, create jobs. Economy works. At the moment, we are having the leading position in the agri-sector, restricting ourselves. And everybody understands, when we unleash this potential by the land market reform, we will have a strong push to our economy. And that needs to happen. In terms of the dirty money, we can see the privatization as something that should add. It's one of the measures that you was explained to you should remove areas for corruption, because at the moment we have thousands of companies managed by the state. Can we get enough managers? Can we get enough supervisory boards, to make sure that the corporate governance is in place, that all of these businesses have sound business model? They have enough money to develop? No. No way. And we cannot do it, and by the way, we shouldn't. Because the state is not, it's not the role of the state to manage assets. Not at all. So we're going to sell it, and this is the right thing to do. In terms of the who is going to buy it, first is the conditions, right? So the conditions, it's actually lack of, basically no additional strings attached. It needs to be clear. Everybody should allow it, by the way, except buyers from the Russian Federation for obvious reason. We don't discriminate. We just think about our country. A and B. The sources of funds will be checked. They will be checked. And it's in the law now that we need to know the ultimate beneficiary needs to be disclosed, right? In order for the buyer to participate. So we take it into consideration. But this is actually, privatization means, fighting with corruption and improving the productivity and giving, broad economic growth. Not privatization equal corruption, not at all.
Thank you.
Minister, thank you for your remarks. My name is Vlad Liberzon, Golden Tree Asset Management. A question about the IMF. The IMF is very focused on the gas prices, and they wanted you to continue raising gas prices this winter. And you said, no, maybe April or maybe by the summer. And I met with the IMF this morning at one of these events, and they're very focused on this, very upset about it. How will you resolve this agreement? What are you proposing to them about the gas subsidy?
Thank you.
Okay, about the gas prices. If we approach this from the position, somebody requires increase, somebody doesn't want or requires decrease in prices, reduction, it's wrong. We're now discussing with the IMF the formula, a fair formula. That's it. That's it. We need to have a formula, A, and it needs to match the correspond to the goals of the program, which is the prices needs to be an import parity level. That's what we're doing at the moment. A. B is we need now to speed up liberalization of the gas market. Because now when we look at the statistic around the world, and it just reinforced our position, is that when we liberalize the market, we will get competition, and that will reduce the prices. A. B. The government will have nothing to do with it. I don't want, but it's not the role of Minister of Finance to discuss with IMF the gas tariffs, right? And I don't want to do it, and we want to have a market, and market will deal with this, right? So that's where we're moving, and we need to introduce this market as soon as possible. There are some very important decisions on the way that we need to make, including subsidies monetization, which our ministry developed with our colleagues as well within the Ministry of Social Affairs, some others. We developed the monetization strategies approach, which we're going to adopt in a week time, right? It's now on the site of the Ministry of Finance. This is a step that boosts competition in the gas sector. Why only NAK Naftogaz should have right to sell the gas? Why? Why? We're building the competitive market. And we would like to have everything to be transparent, right? We want to see all the waste, which we currently cannot see. So that's the key ambition, because the end goal is to liberalize the market. That's what is in the program, and we need to achieve it.
So what you're telling us is that the IMF should buy your price formula?
Well, they cannot sell it. I'm not going. It's not a commodity or something. No, we don't buy. Listen, we have a very good relationship with IMF team. You know, they never manipulated, never. That's why we are where we are, right? So open discussions, and in this discussion we will find a solution. That's it. So nobody's selling anything. Again, I told you at the beginning, I'm not a marketing person. I don't get it. But if I believe in something, I can communicate it. If I don't, there are some issues with that. Then you have some, you know.
Yeah, I have several questions.
Different
Down there
skills.
in the corner.
Nope.
Blaise Anton with TCW Investment Management. We own lots of your bonds. We bought the new bonds, and we were on the restructuring committee in 2015. You've done a lot of great work. Thank you for that. If I can follow up on the issue of corruption and ask about a couple of real-life examples. Last month, President Poroshenko seemed to have an argument or a debate with John Kerry at a conference in Ukraine about the importance of the anti-corruption court, not just arresting people for corruption, but actually convicting them and sending them to prison. You said earlier that the Venice Commission report is very important. You're now going to update the draft legislation around the anti-corruption court to reflect the Venice Commission recommendations. Does that mean that this was the tipping point, that the disputes between, for example, Secretary Kerry and President Poroshenko last week are now a thing of the past, that the Venice Commission will be taken on board fully, and that you think that what you're going to do will be fully accepted by the West and the IMF in terms of meeting the requirements for delivering a proper anti-corruption court? And then specifically, and if you could just address in a related fashion, the EU has 600 million euros that are available to you until the end of this year. My understanding is the only holdup is a dispute around the timber industry in particular. It's very non-transparent. Some of us in the investor community wonder who's behind this, who's got a timber interest that's preventing Ukraine from accessing these funds, which go away at the end of December. And then secondly, and related, why the delay for 5 months now in finding a new central bank governor? Is there also a vested interest problem there that's delaying resolution on this matter, which is not technically a prior action in the program, but is certainly important from an investor sentiment standpoint?
Thank you very much.
Sorry for the shouting. I don't have a mic.
You're good on that. I don't know why people use microphones, right? I will use microphone to answer. Look, with anti-corruption, I'm not aware about this dispute. Somehow it's missed. I don't know whether it was or not, but I could speculate.
I was there. This was on the 15th of September.
Yeah.
So first, the president spoke in favor of an anti-corruption chamber instead of an independent anti-corruption court. And Secretary Kerry in the next session said that Ukraine needed independent anti-corruption court. So that's what it's referred to.
So there was
then 2 weeks later, your president changed position and said that he was in favor of an independent anti-corruption court.
So I actually didn't hear the dispute here, but I've heard the two positions. And look, I don't want to speculate, but I know the position of the president, that one of his main reform initiatives is judiciary reform. And he invested a lot of his political capital to push it through last year. So obviously he wants this reform to be successful. And so this may be, the discussions about anti-corruption court, he commented several times that pretty much at the end of the reform, right, all courts needs to be professional, there should be no corruption there. The question about specialization, right? And, I believe the answer is, and where we're going now, is to having both chamber And I don't believe, when you say independent anti-corruption court, the whole judiciary system needs to be independent, including anti-corruption chamber, by the way. If it's not independent, then what's the point of having the independent anti-corruption court if at the end of the day you cannot have justice on the top level after its appeal process is over, right? So I think this is the model that we would move forward. Is if we need specialization, we might have actually both, and I think this is the best scenario. In terms of the macro-financial assistance, yes, indeed, timber is the stumbling block.
And you don't want to elaborate on who is behind it?
I'm working for the Minister of Finance. Right? I'm not working for the Secret Service or something. Yeah. I'm sure it's not one person. It's some people who benefit from this, but it's not about benefit and not benefit. It actually could be a very simple business case, right? What people don't believe in competition, because I believe our advantage. We have timber, right? Actually, we need to create business conditions so that it being kind of used here, right? Because it's cheaper, logistically quite attractive as well. So, but this forest being shipped to Europe, but this is a challenge to us. We need to improve business climate, not to block this, right? So I hope we will address it. It's a big issue. I tell you, in the parliament, it's a big issue. It's overly politicized. So I think it will be politically wrong to miss such assistance, right? Because it's a signal of support from European Union. So we are working towards getting it, right? We have some things on the critical path. This one is the most challenging. Everything else is doable, and we're at the moment completing all other preconditions. On NBU, look, I don't know, right? What I can tell is that at the moment, the acting head, when we cooperate now with NBU, nothing changed. It's a professional institution with well-established processes, which doing their job very professional, right? Obviously, the country needs permanent governor of the central bank, and it's the president's prerogative to nominate such a candidate. And this is a very, it's not an easy decision, right? It's a very responsible decision, because prior to that, we had a very professional governor, right? And so we need a very strong governor to continue, the reforms that were done with the national bank. So that's it's a huge responsibility. And from this point of view, I would rather. This is president's right, and he will use his right. And I wouldn't want anyone to rush it, right? Because that's a bigger. Otherwise, if we rush it, it will not be his decision. Everything should be legal. That's his right, and he will use his right. And I'm sure we'll have a very strong governor.
You can tell him that people here wanted him to rush it.
Rushing is not good.
I've seen, yes. Then after Cargill.
Hi, Minister. Van Yiter from Cargill. I just wanted to echo what you said on the VAT. For many years, I lived firsthand the problems and the corruption on the VAT side, and the system now today is so much better than the old ways. It's just fantastic. It's more of an automatic system where you've eliminated as you said, the opportunity for corruption. There is a draft law that I think you're aware of, 7115, in the Ukrainian parliament today, that would actually take a step back on that automatic payments of the VAT. As I understand it, I know you're fighting against that, as are we and others in the industry. So hopefully that will not get any traction and it will go away. But I just, wanted to put the push out there to make sure that did not happen and take a step back in that regard. The grain market, the next issue, apart from the VAT that we're pushing, is for looking at the black market that's going on in the grain markets today. We're working with our industry to try to come up with some recommendations to the government on how to work on that. So when we get those together, we'd like to present those to you and your government. But I just want to say thank you for the work you're doing. It's making a real difference, and we're very grateful. Thank you.
It was
Thank
more
you.
a comment than a question. Do you want to?
Yeah, I will. Thank you very much. Thank you for this. I will only comment on the, if you don't mind, on this law. It actually surprises me that people can call, white things black and vice versa. Clearly this law is against business. Clearly this law aimed at returning the corruption into VAT refund scheme. Clearly. And yet, with enormous persistence, a group of MPs pushing it. They will hit the wall. That's what I can say. I know why it's fueled. It's fueled by the, by the lost benefits, right? This is their problem. We will not allow this, and you will not allow this, because it is your money. Now you get it, right? It's not their money. This is your money. And that's how it should be. So I'm not that. I'm concerned. So of course I'm fighting, but I believe, that such changes, especially with clear lies, saying that we do it for the business. They're not doing it for the business. They do not do it for the business. They do it for their own interest. And such things were possible 5 years ago. It will not be possible now, and it will not be possible in the future. Life changed.
Thank you. Francis Malish, EBRD.
Thank you on this. And, thank you, Minister. You've just demonstrated one of the most important qualities of a Minister of Finance, which is the ability to say no. And you've been very successful at reforming the country in the very difficult circumstances that you described. And there's another set of circumstances that's going to set in the near future, which is going to test even further that ability to say no. Because, as you know, there's elections coming up in 18 months' time for the president and in 2 years' time for the parliament. And during that time, it's going to be much harder to continue reforming. And you're going to have to fight a budget, a pre-election budget, and we all know what a pre-election budget means. So I would encourage you to continue developing that ability to say no with such a force of conviction. But I'd also like to ask, what do you see as the key reforms that can be accomplished in a pre-election period?
Well, look, the budget. I was thinking when you mentioned the election that you were trying to influence my choice, whereas you should say no to certain candidates. No, it's about reforms. Okay, that's easier. Look, the budget, during the budget process, there are always attempts to, to introduce something. Not, by the way, bad things. Can you imagine something? Sometimes there are good ideas, and we're not claiming that we are. We know everything, right? That's why we have a parliament. We have some strong people in the parliament. We're open to discussion with MPs to improve the budget. We will say yes to things which improve the budget, and we'll say no to the things which don't. And we've done it last year. It's something we missed, but overall it was a good budget. Why? Because we changed the approach. We submit the budget on time. We submitted already second year in September, and we're ready for every deadline which is specified by the budget code, because it allows enough time for MPs to review, to provide their comments. It also limits them what they can do and limits us. When you act within the budget code, you can maximize the quality of the budget. The previous experience was the budget was submitted in September, but never ended up in the parliament because it was immediately recalled back. And then next time MPs seen them is just before the new year. And they had good 20 hours in the best case scenario to look at this, and it was a mess. We don't want this. So by changing the process, we guarantee the quality of the budget. A. B. On the reforms, right? We advanced a lot already in the parliament, right? So after we adopt healthcare reform and hopefully land market reform, we need to use this year, right, to pass the parliament. And then I cannot say that we ignore the parliament. We cannot do it, it's wrong. But I think we as a government need to focus on implementation, right? Sometimes quality is more important than quantity. And this is exactly where we are. We need to have strong capacity to implement something that was approved by the parliament. And this is a huge role of the parliament, that they gave a start to the reforms. And this is actually very important, a sign of support as well. But now it's our responsibility to implement it. And I see next year, the year we need to focus on implementation. And that is the year when we need to complete the one of the most important reforms that we're currently doing is tax administration reform. This is it's a historically corrupt institution, very low, not effective, and a lot needs to be done with process redesign, with organizational changes, with bringing new people to the organization. So this is like make it more service oriented. This is enormous work, which has very tangible results. That's what people would, business and taxpayers overall broadly will feel. So this is one. Healthcare, low adopted, we need to implement it. Pension reform, the same. Land market, the same. Implementation. And so when in every country there are some discussions about the pre-election discussions, the government should not be part of it. The government should be working and doing the things which was for what it was created for, or put together for.
Question here. And then down there.
Hi, Mr. Minister. Good to see you again. Karen Tramontano with Blue Star Strategies. And congratulations on everything that you've accomplished for your country. For about 18 months, we worked with you on market distortion on minimum prices in tobacco. And speaking as one of my colleagues did from Carlisle, sort of they're back again, the vested interests are back again, now with prohibitive minimum, and it's a market distortion. And I just, not to get into the weeds, but we're going to need your support again. You understand that this distorts the market. You understand it's not, if we're going to have a market, we should let the market, as you said, set the price and not vested interest in their parliamentarian colleagues. So I just ask again for your support.
Thank you. I see a few that I missed there. I would like to take, there were a couple of hands at the end of the hall. Morgan, you help me. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. Hi, thank you very much for your time this afternoon and your insightful comments. I'm Lorraine Hawley with Archer Daniels Midland Company. We're a global agribusiness company, and we've been investing in Ukraine's oilseeds processing and grain trading industry. My colleague from Cargill literally took the words out of my mouth, but I just wanted to reinforce the importance of maintaining a transparent and efficient VAT administration process. and to thank you for the leadership that you have provided to ensure that we have these processes in place and are seeing improvements. Since the implementation of the electronic VAT administration system, we have definitely seen a more timely and efficient repayment of our VAT. And we also share the concerns expressed by law number 7115 and appreciate any efforts that can be made by you and your colleagues to ensure that that law does not become implemented and that we maintain an improvement in terms of the VAT administration processes. And thank you again for your leadership.
Yeah. Anybody more? Thanks. Robert, you had your hand up also, yeah?
Yes, thank you. My name is Robert Homans. I've spent about 12 years in Ukraine working on access to finance issues. I have a question about small businesses in Ukraine, or independent businesses in Ukraine. I've done kind of an informal survey of friends of mine who own or manage independent businesses in Ukraine. And it seems like they're sitting on a lot of cash. And I've also talked about this with people at the international development banks who have programs to lend local currency to small businesses. I think there are probably two reasons for this. One is the gray economy. The other is that independent businesses in Ukraine under Yanukovych faced a terrible atmosphere in terms of tax inspections, corporate rates, and so on. From a policy standpoint, what do you suggest that the government can do to induce these businesses to start spending this money? I suppose you can offer a tax holiday to those who are in the gray economy. Your predecessor had suggested an investment tax credit. What kind of suggestions or policy prescriptions might you have to address this? If you agree with it, I'm not sure you agree with it.
I think that's the last question. Anybody who absolutely needs to say something? Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, good that you ask whether I agree with this, because my view, I'm not usually ready to support some additional incentives until the other barriers are removed. And I clearly see that at the moment there are some barriers still from the same law enforcement, right? From ineffective tax administration. And the benefits will not motivate. I think our obligation now, and by the way, this is, but good that you raise it, right? Because obviously, if you want to stimulate the development, you should think about some of these motivation stimuluses, right? We should think about this. But again, and now it is in my mind. But I also see this, huge elephant in front of me, right? That obstructs the, the future, right? And we need to do something with this elephant. We should not just ignore, right? And this is law enforcement, right? And tax administration. We also changed some regulations, so deregulation efforts. Those are, they need to be moved on the way. And that enough would provide, by itself, a motivation for business to invest. They're doing it now, but we want more. So we need to improve the business climate. And then we can think about some additional stimuluses. Because at the moment, we could introduce it, but the effect will not be there, I'm certain. Also what we do is, we have this, life cycle of the company. Big companies, not all of them grow, of course, but there are big companies, very small companies, or mid-sized companies. And we're actually looking at why are small companies not growing? And how can we help them? There is clearly access to finances. There is a problem of this law enforcement, because historically, if the company grows above certain level, it gets on the radar of some. That needs to be, it's not now the common practice. It's still happening, but when it happens, it pollutes the trust, atmosphere around. So that needs to be, unrooted entirely. So we're looking at this, and we do everything possible to support business.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Minister, for your very clarifying and generous answers.
Thank you.